You've probably seen people give advice like this online very often. So I'm talking about statements like, learn all the modes if you want to play jazz, or first learn to play all the modes all over the neck and then start checking out 2-5-1s. But what this actually makes you practice is not really setting you on a path to play better solos and actually learn how to play jazz. So the question is if this is good advice at all, and maybe there's something else that you want to check out. So in this video, I'm going to talk a little bit about that, and then I'm also going to give you a skill that I think you should develop instead of checking out modes. That's really gonna help you play better solos, become a better improviser. My name is Jens Larsen, learn jazz, make music. There's nothing wrong with the modes, they certainly have a place in jazz history, but the way they're taught is not really going to help you become a better jazz improviser or teach you how to play jazz. There are other skills that you need to develop, and actually coming from sort of this very basic way of looking at modes is not going to help you, it's going to work against you. So this video is really more to help you think about how you want to learn to play jazz and what you want to focus on and the skills you want to develop. Later in the video, I'm going to go over a skill that's really essential for playing jazz and that you need to develop. And in fact, if you develop this skill, then you don't really need to worry about the modes at all, because then you can play them anyway. Most modal lessons are going to teach you how to construct that mode or how to come up with the mode, and they're going to do this by either giving you a list of notes and then relating that to another scale, maybe using a diagram, or just to give you a set of intervals that are going to construct that scale. There's nothing wrong with that information, that's basic information, that's all fine, but it's not really going to teach you how to play and improvise better jazz solos or how to use this on a song, because we all know that there are quite a few steps in between knowing how to construct a Dorian scale and play a lick that sounds like this. A good way to teach the modes if you're coming from pentatonic scales is to take the pentatonic scales and then start adding notes to it, and that way building the mode. And this works really well if you're playing over the same chord for 4 bars and you have time to explore how that sounds. But if you're playing jazz music where you have sort of longer rows of progressions with a lot of moving harmony, then probably you want to just focus on actually learning how to play over changing chords and not have too many mental detours along the way. If you're learning how to play jazz, then you should be learning how to play jazz songs. And most of the easy jazz songs, so the jazz standards, are in fact not modal at all, they're tonal. They use functional harmony, and when you're improvising over a song like that, then you kind of have to play the movement of the chords. So it's not really about this scale over this chord and then how that sounds. It's about a row of chords, and the chords are moving in a logical way from one to the next, and you want to play that movement, and you want to play solo lines that are following and making those chord changes clear. This means that if you're playing a solo and nobody is playing the chords behind you, we can still hear that the chords are changing and what the chord progression is. You want to hear examples of this, then listen to some bebop. There it's usually quite clear what's going on, and if you want to hear some of that outside jazz, then check out some country solos where they're also very often approaching playing over chords in this way. When you learn a mode, then you learn a scale. You learn 7 notes, and you're not really given the tools to improvise over the chord that's associated with that mode. And the way that the mode is defined is very often that there are some characteristic notes that are different if you compare it to a major or a minor scale. But those characteristic notes don't actually work that well with the chord very often. And that means that if you start emphasizing those in your solo, then it's gonna sound pretty weak or maybe just completely wrong. To give you a practical example of this, if I have a variation of a 3-6-2-5 in C, so that could be something like E minor, A7, D minor to G7, then on the E minor chord, that's the 3rd mode of C major, so that's Phrygian, and the way we kind of define that would be that it's a minor scale with a flat 6 and a flat 9. So the flat 9 and the flat 6 are really what defines that mode. But if I'm playing the flat 9 on top of the chord, you can hear that that doesn't really sound like the chord at all. It doesn't really fit in this context. So it makes much more sense to focus on the notes in the chord and not so much on the notes in the scale. Another thing that modes don't do that well, because the focus is on the scale and not the chord, is that it doesn't really make a difference between very common chord progressions and almost random chord progressions. So in terms of modes, this is Dorian, Mixolydian, Ionian, but so is this Dorian, Mixolydian, Ionian. And your ear can tell the difference, because one of those is probably the most common progression that we have in jazz, and the other one is almost completely random. As you can tell, what I think is missing is the ability to relate what we're playing to the chords, so that the way that we think about things is also going to give us something to play. It doesn't really make a lot of sense to just have 7 notes, and the way we think about them is how they are different or the same as a major or a minor scale. That's not going to give us anything that we can play when we're improvising over a chord in a song. So instead, I think it's more useful to focus on the notes of the chord, the arpeggio, and to get the sound of the chord across in what you're playing. And the final goal should really be that you can take any chord, any scale where the notes of that chord are in, and then play a meaningful line over that, sounding like the chord. Another thing I think you want to start working with right away is that when you're improvising, that you're already working on playing the chord changes. What you're playing on this chord should already be leading to the notes in the next chord, and you want to think ahead and you want to play to that chord change, because that's really an important part of playing over chord progressions. Of course, what I'm talking about here is really improvising with arpeggios and improvising with target notes. And these are things that I talk about really often in my other videos. And if you want to get started working like this, then I will leave a link to a playlist in the description of this video where you can check out some of the basic ideas behind these concepts. And it is worth mentioning that if you can take any chord and a scale where that chord is in, and then make a solo line that sounds like the chord, then you can actually play all the modes. You don't really need to work on it that much or look at it in a different way. It's just something that you've already developed as a skill. To just quickly explain the basic thing behind playing over chord changes and playing a melody that sounds like a chord. If we have a C major 7, like this chord, and then the scale that we have that fits with this would be a C major scale, so. And if you want to play something that fits with this chord and sounds like the chord, then it makes sense that you want to use just some of the same notes. So then you want to be using G, E, B, and C, and that's the arpeggio of the chord. So a C major 7 arpeggio would be. And then what you want to practice doing is improvise melodies and learn how to make melodies that really emphasize those arpeggio notes. And then the other notes in the scale are something that you kind of put in between. And that could give you a melody like this. It's very easy to make a video or a blog article that shows you that this row of notes is Dorian and this row of notes is Aeolian. But going through that is not really gonna give you anything that you can take away, practice, and that will improve you as an improviser or teach you how to play jazz. If you want to check out some more videos where there are some exercises, some things you can work on and that you can really get into your playing and that will help you play better solos, then check out this playlist. I'm also just curious on your thoughts on this whole thing. So leave a comment if you agree or if you disagree, and for the rest, see you next week.